My parents vehemently shouted, "You are not the daughter I'd always hoped for. You never truly were." My mother wished she had terminated my very existence. I calmly smoothed my coat, announced I'd entirely cease existing, and then departed. They later reappeared when their whole world completely imploded, desperately pleading for a chance I would not guarantee. She was dying, ravaged by cancer, and she wanted to see me. The woman who once told me she wished I was never born now lay frail in a hospital bed, begging for my presence. That phone call, years before, hadn't just broken me. It vaporized everything I thought I knew about family, shattering it into a million shimmering shards. It was a single brutal sentence, delivered with the casual cruelty of a surgeon's blade, that cemented decades of neglect and dismissed my very existence. A person can only be told they are worthless so many times before a part of them starts to believe it, but this was different. My world had always felt conditional, perched precariously on an unspoken list of achievements and expectations I could never meet. But now, suddenly, the entire foundation beneath me had been ripped away, leaving a gaping void. I remember the air in the marsh that day, thick, cold, and damp. It clung to my waders like a second skin, seeping into my bones even through the insulated fabric. The smell of briny water, decaying vegetation, and fertile mud was usually a comfort, a grounding aroma that signaled important work. That day, it just felt heavy, suffocating. I was knee-deep in the important work I loved, miles from the echoing disappointment of my past, yet the past had found me. Growing up in San Jose, I quickly learned that love, in my house, was a transaction, an unspoken ledger of worth and approval. My younger brother, Daniel, was the golden child. He was everything our parents, Eleanor and Robert, had dreamed of: athletic, charismatic, a natural leader. He played varsity football, dated the homecoming queen, got into UC Berkeley on a partial scholarship that was celebrated like a full ride. Every Sunday dinner was a quiet, almost reverent, celebration of his triumphs, his awards displayed on the mantel. Meanwhile, I sat at the far end of the table, utterly invisible, a ghost haunting my own home. You know, sometimes I wondered if I was even really there, if they could actually see me. I was different. Bookish, introverted, my passion lay in environmental science and wildlife conservation, in the quiet observation of the natural world. While Daniel brought home trophies and accolades from the football field, I brought research papers and volunteer certificates from the local animal shelter, my fingers often stained with ink or damp earth. Eleanor would glance at them with a tight, polite disinterest that barely masked her genuine disappointment, a subtle tightening around her mouth that spoke volumes. Robert was worse. He'd try to hide it, offering a forced pat on my shoulder and a hollow, "That's nice, honey," before immediately turning to Daniel to discuss business strategies or football plays, his eyes lighting up in a way they never did for me. My father owned a successful commercial real estate firm, and from the time Daniel turned 16, he was explicitly groomed to take it over. Nobody ever bothered to ask what I wanted. They'd already decided my path didn't align with their vision, with the glossy magazine spread of a family they wanted to present to the world. This kind of dynamic, where one child becomes the golden child and another the scapegoat or invisible child, is a classic pattern of narcissistic parenting. The parents project their unmet needs and insecurities onto their children, valuing them not for who they are, but for how well they fulfill a predetermined role or reflect positively on the parents. The invisible child, like me, learns that love is conditional, always just out of reach, and often tied to accomplishments that aren't authentically their own. High school was tolerable because I found friends who genuinely saw me, who celebrated my quirks and passions. College was freedom, a glorious, liberating breath of fresh air. I went to UC Santa Cruz for marine biology, funded mostly by scholarships and a small inheritance from my grandmother Agnes that, thankfully, Eleanor couldn't touch. Those 4 years were transformative. They taught me I could exist, even thrive, without their approval. Graduate school reinforced it. By 25, I'd landed a position with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, focusing on coastal habitat restoration. The work was meaningful, the pay decent, and here's the thing, I was good at it. I published papers, led field teams, secured grants. My supervisor, Dr. Hayes, even told me I had a future in policy if I wanted it. Meanwhile, Daniel graduated from UC Berkeley and joined Robert's firm. He married his college girlfriend, Chloe, in a lavish ceremony where I was relegated to the outer edges of family photos, a blurry background figure. They bought a house in Walnut Creek with Robert's help, a down payment gift I knew I'd never receive. I didn't resent Daniel, not really. He'd been kind to me in his own way growing up, defending me from bullies, helping with homework when our parents weren't watching. The problem wasn't him. The problem was that in my parents' eyes, there was only room for one child to truly matter, to truly embody their hopes, and it had never been me. But the real breaking point arrived during Thanksgiving when I was 28. I'd been dating Alex for 6 months, a fellow marine biologist who worked for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We were serious enough that I wanted him to meet my family, foolish enough to believe this time might be different, that perhaps, finally, they might see me. Dinner was at my parents' house in Midtown San Jose, the same opulent dining room where I'd spent countless holidays feeling utterly inadequate. Daniel and Chloe were there with their newborn daughter, Lily, a tiny, adorable bundle. My Aunt Sharon and Uncle Michael had driven up from Los Angeles. Everyone gathered around the baby, cooing and passing her between arms while Eleanor, ever the precise matriarch, orchestrated the meal with military precision. Alex and I arrived with wine and flowers, a peace offering. Eleanor accepted both with a tight smile that never quite reached her eyes, a familiar chill in her gaze. Robert shook Alex's hand with the perfunctory, dismissive grip he reserved for people he didn't consider important, his attention already elsewhere. Dinner conversation revolved, predictably, around Daniel's recent promotion to senior vice president, Lily's latest infant achievements, and Robert's ambitious plans to expand the business into Arizona. When there was a lull, a brief, blessed silence, I mentioned that my team had just secured a $3 million federal grant to restore wetlands along the San Francisco Bay Estuary. Eleanor slowly set down her fork, the clink echoing in the sudden quiet. That's taxpayer money, isn't it? The entire table went silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I felt Alex's hand find mine under the table, a reassuring squeeze. It's federal funding allocated for environmental conservation, I said carefully, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. The project will create jobs and restore critical habitat for endangered species. Robert scoffed, reaching for his wine glass. Sounds like government waste to me. Daniel just closed a deal worth $40 million. Private sector, real growth, actual value creation. My throat tightened, a hot flush spreading across my neck. Different types of value I managed, my voice barely a whisper. Money is money, sweetheart. Robert's tone was dismissive, the way you'd explain something obvious to a particularly slow child. You're almost 30. When are you going to get serious about your career? Alex stiffened beside me, his jaw tightening. She has a doctorate and leads a team of 12 scientists, he interjected, his voice polite but firm. That seems pretty serious to me. Eleanor's eyes flickered to Alex with something like disdain, a cold, piercing gaze. You must be the boyfriend. The one who also works for the government. Alex, ever composed, replied, I'm a federal researcher, yes, ma'am. How lovely, she purred, her voice so devoid of warmth it could have frozen water. 2 people living off taxpayer dollars. Quite the power couple. Sharon tried to change the subject, asking about Lily's first Thanksgiving, but the damage was done. I could feel the familiar, suffocating weight settling over me, the crushing awareness that nothing I did would ever be enough. The sting of their words, the dismissal of my life's work, was a fresh wound, but it was also a familiar pain, one I'd carried since childhood. This repeated invalidation, where one's achievements and identity are constantly undermined by those who should be supportive, is an insidious form of emotional gaslighting. It forces the target to question their own reality and worth, making it difficult to maintain a strong sense of self and leading to profound psychological distress. Lily, 5 years old and oblivious to the tension, tugged on my sleeve. Auntie, do you want to see my drawings? I did. More than anything, I wanted to escape the suffocating dining room. They were beautiful crayon renderings of dolphins and sea turtles, vibrant and full of life. For a moment, I saw a piece of myself in her innocent curiosity about marine life, a fleeting glimpse of connection. We made it through dessert before Alex, and I announced we were leaving. Eleanor didn't try to stop us. Robert had already moved to the living room with Daniel to watch football, his back to me. I thought that was it. I thought I'd go home, cry it off, and maintain the shallow, polite relationship we'd established, surface-level pleasantries during holidays, minimal contact otherwise. I'd stopped expecting more years ago. But that wasn't the end of it, not even close. 3 days later, Eleanor called. I was in the field, knee-deep in marsh mud, collecting sediment samples, when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer. Maybe I should have let it ring. But something, some flicker of an old, dying hope, made me check. You embarrassed us on Thanksgiving, Eleanor said without preamble, her voice a razor's edge. Bringing that boy and flaunting your little government job like it's something to be proud of. I pulled off my heavy field gloves, my team working around me, their distant chatter a stark contrast to the venom in my ear. I'm at work, Mom. Can this wait? No, it cannot wait. Your father and I have discussed this extensively. We're concerned about your life choices. My choices are fine. They're not. Her voice had that sharp, biting edge I remembered from childhood scoldings, the one that always meant I was about to be dissected. You're nearly 30, unmarried, working a job with no real prospects. You've wasted your education on a field that will never provide financial stability or social standing. The marsh suddenly felt very cold, an icy grip around my ankles. What exactly do you want from me? We want you to stop pretending you're satisfied with mediocrity. Daniel has built something real. You're chasing birds in swamps, she finished, a sneer audible in her tone. Endangered shorebirds in critical habitat zones, I said quietly, a tremor in my voice, and I'm good at it. You're good at disappointing us. Eleanor's words were precise. Surgical. You've been doing it since you were 12 and refused to try out for cheerleading. Since you turned down that nice boy, Ben, whose father owns the car dealership. Since you picked bugs and animals over business school. I'm a marine biologist. You're a waste of potential. Her voice rose, the careful control slipping, a crack revealing the depth of her contempt. Do you know what it's like for me at the club? When Carol brags about her daughter, the attorney, when Susan talks about her son, the surgeon, what do I say? That mine is playing in mud for $40,000 a year. Something inside me crystallized, hardening with a cold, clear resolve. I make $73,000 plus benefits, and I've published 14 peer-reviewed papers. Nobody cares about your papers. Eleanor was shouting now, her voice shrill and piercing. Nobody cares that you can identify some fish or count some birds. You're not the daughter I wanted. You never were. From the day you were born, I looked at you and knew you'd be difficult. I told your father we should stop at one. That Daniel was enough. I should have. She stopped herself abruptly, but I heard the unspoken words echoing in the sudden, ringing silence. You should have what? My voice didn't sound like mine, it was thin and sharp. Nothing. Forget it. Say it. Ice ran through my veins, freezing me from the inside out. Finish what you were going to say. A long pause, then softer, but infinitely more devastating. I should have made different choices. You've been nothing but a disappointment from the beginning. I wished I had never had you. Are you happy? That's how much pain you've caused this family. The world tilted around me. My team continued working, oblivious, their distant laughter and chatter sounding utterly alien. Someone cracked a joke I couldn't hear. A heron flew overhead, majestic and free. Okay, I said, the word a flat, empty sound. Okay, what? She snapped. Okay, I understand. Thank you for clarifying. Don't take that tone with me. You need to accept reality and make changes. Your father agrees. We've discussed cutting you out of any inheritance unless you get your life together. Go to business school. Find a real job. Marry someone respectable. Stop wasting your life on nonsense. I looked down at my muddy boots, at my field notebook filled with careful observations, at the water samples that would help determine restoration success. I thought about the grant I'd written that would fund 3 years of critical research, the interns I was mentoring, the entire ecosystem I was helping to save. I need to go, I said, my voice eerily calm. We're having dinner next month to discuss this properly. You'll be there. No, I said. I won't. Excuse me? I won't be there. I won't be anywhere you are ever again. Eleanor laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. Don't be dramatic. I'm not. My hands were steady as I packed my equipment, the movements precise. You wished you had never had me. You think I'm a waste and a disappointment. You don't want the daughter I am. So, I'm going to make this easy for everyone. I'll stop existing for you. You can't just, I hung up. My supervisor, Dr. Hayes, was watching me with concern. Everything okay? Family stuff. I'll be fine, I lied. I wasn't fine. Not even close. I drove. Home in a daze, the world a blurry wash of green and gray. The phone in my hand felt heavy, still vibrating with the ghost of her words. I called Alex and cried for 2 hours straight, incoherent sobs racking my body while he held me, murmuring soft comforts. Then, with a clarity born of absolute pain, I did something I should have done years earlier. I blocked Eleanor's number. Then Robert's. Then Daniel's, because I knew they'd use him as a messenger. The next week, I changed my emergency contacts at work, removed them from my social media. When a Christmas card arrived weeks later, I returned it unopened. Daniel tried anyway. He showed up at my apartment 3 weeks after that phone call, standing in the hallway looking uncomfortable and guilty. I almost didn't let him in. They sent you, I said through the cracked door, my voice flat. Nobody sent me. I came because you're my sister. His eyes were red, shadowed with an unfamiliar grief. What Mom said was unforgivable. I told her that. Dad too. They know they screwed up. They've been screwing up my entire life. This was just the first time they said it out loud. I know. Daniel's voice broke, thick with tears. I know. I should have defended you more. I was a coward, but please don't disappear. You're my sister. The thing about Daniel was that he genuinely believed this. He'd lived in a different house than I had, with entirely different parents. His version of Eleanor was proud and supportive. His version of Robert was engaged and encouraging. He'd witnessed my mistreatment, but never truly understood it because it hadn't been his reality. His soul wasn't the one being systematically dismantled. I love you, I told him, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. But I can't have them in my life anymore. And if you're going to be their messenger, I can't have you either. I'm not their messenger. I'm your brother who's scared of losing you. You should have thought about that before you let them make me invisible for 28 years. I closed the door. He knocked for 5 minutes, a soft, desperate rhythm, before finally leaving. I sat on the floor of my apartment and cried until my throat was raw. Alex stayed through all of it. Even when I woke up crying at 3 a.m., even when I canceled plans because I couldn't face pretending to be okay, he understood what it meant to be judged for choosing passion over profit. He was the soft landing I'd never known I needed. January brought a job offer that changed everything. The Scripps Institution of Oceanography wanted me to head their new coastal conservation program. Better pay, more resources, a prestigious institution. I'd be working with some of the best marine scientists in the country. I accepted. Within a week, Alex got a transfer to NOAA's Southwest Fishery Science Center in Encinitas. We moved together to a small house in Carlsbad with a view of the ocean, close enough to my work near the coast, far enough from San Jose that running into family was impossible. The move itself was liberating. I packed up my apartment and realized how little I actually owned that connected me to my childhood. A few photos of Daniel and Lily, my grandmother Agnes's necklace, some books from college. Everything else was mine alone, untainted by memories of disappointment. Our new house needed work, but that made it perfect. Alex and I spent weekends stripping wallpaper, painting rooms in colors we chose together, planting native gardens that would attract local wildlife. Every improvement felt like a declaration of independence, a brushstroke on the canvas of a life finally, truly my own. This was ours. Nobody could walk through and judge it. Nobody could compare it unfavorably to Daniel's larger, professionally decorated showcase. My team at Scripps was everything I'd hoped for: 15 researchers, 5 support staff, and a budget that let us actually accomplish meaningful work. My first project involved mapping eelgrass beds along the Central Coast and developing restoration protocols for degraded habitats. The data we collected would inform policy decisions affecting thousands of acres of marine habitat. Dr. Maya Sanchez became not just a colleague, but a genuine friend. She'd grown up in a similar family dynamic, the disappointing daughter who chose archaeology over law school. We'd share coffee in the lab and swap stories about family dysfunction, laughing at the sheer absurdity of parents who couldn't see value outside their narrow definitions. My mother once told me I was wasting my PhD, Maya said one morning, examining sediment cores, her voice laced with wry humor. She said I should have become a paralegal like my cousin, because apparently spending my life uncovering human history is less valuable than filing legal documents. Did you cut her off? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Limited contact. I see her twice a year and let her believe I'm a teacher because it's easier than explaining what I actually do. She looked at me curiously, her dark eyes sharp. You went full scorched earth, though. That takes guts. It was survival. Staying connected was slowly ending me. Do you regret it? I thought about that. No. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that I didn't have the parents I deserved, but cutting them off? That was the healthiest thing I've ever done. Work filled my days with purpose. I'd arrive at the lab by 7, spend hours analyzing data, reviewing grant proposals, mentoring graduate students who reminded me of my younger self, passionate, uncertain, hungry for validation from someone who understood their calling. I gave them what Eleanor never gave me: genuine interest in their work, constructive feedback, encouragement that wasn't conditional on fitting someone else's vision. One student, Ben, came to me in tears halfway through his first year. My parents say marine science is a dead-end field. They want me to switch to engineering. I saw myself in his face, the doubt warring with conviction. What do you want? I asked softly. I want to study coral reef restoration. I want to spend my life helping ecosystems recover from human damage, but they say that won't pay my bills. Then I said, a firm kindness in my voice, I own my house outright at 31. I consult for state and federal agencies. I've published papers that have influenced international policy. Your parents are wrong about the field. The question is whether you're strong enough to prove it to them. He stayed. Last I heard, he'd secured a prestigious fellowship studying Caribbean reef systems. His parents still didn't understand, but he'd stopped needing them too. For the first time in my life, I stopped waiting for approval that would never come. I stopped justifying my existence to people who had already decided I wasn't enough. I built a life from scratch, surrounded by people who valued expertise over appearances, conservation over consumption. The work was extraordinary. I led a team of 20 researchers, secured funding from private foundations and government agencies, published papers that were cited hundreds of times. At 30, I was invited to speak at international conferences. At 31, National Geographic featured my work in a documentary about coastal restoration. The documentary changed things in ways I hadn't anticipated. Suddenly, strangers recognized me at conferences. Universities invited me to give lectures. My inbox filled with interview requests from science, journalists, and environmental podcasts. The visibility was uncomfortable at first. I'd spent my life being invisible. But I learned to use it strategically. Every platform became an opportunity to advocate for conservation funding, to highlight the work of my team, to demonstrate that environmental science was both meaningful and viable as a career. One interview question stuck with me. A reporter from a science magazine asked, "What drives your passion for this work?" I almost gave the standard answer about loving the ocean, about wanting to protect ecosystems for future generations. But something made me honest. I spent my childhood being told that what I cared about didn't matter. That studying living systems was frivolous compared to business or law. I do this work partly because it needs doing, but also to prove that the people who dismissed me were catastrophically wrong. Every restored wetland, every protected habitat, Every policy I influence, it's proof that they didn't know what they were talking about. The quote appeared in the article. I got emails from dozens of scientists sharing similar stories. Apparently, parental dismissal was a common origin story in conservation biology. This experience highlights the concept of reactive identity formation, where individuals define themselves not just by internal desires, but often in opposition to negative external pressures. My drive wasn't solely about my love for the environment, but also a powerful, subconscious need to invalidate the damaging narratives imposed by my parents, transforming that initial pain into a fierce engine for success. Alex proposed on the beach where we'd collected our first samples together, the sand soft under our feet, the Pacific roaring its approval. We had a small ceremony, just close friends. My colleague, Dr. Maya Sanchez, was my maid of honor. No family from my side. It hurt less than I'd expected, the ache of familiar dull throb rather than a sharp stab. The ceremony took place at sunset on a quiet stretch of beach near our house. 20 people gathered on the sand, colleagues, friends from graduate school, Alex's parents and sister who'd welcomed me into their family without reservation. His mother had cried when we told her about my parents, not with pity, but with anger on my behalf. You deserved better, she'd said simply. But you found it anyway. That takes strength most people never develop. I wore a simple dress, carried native wildflowers Maya had gathered that morning. No elaborate production, no drama, just two people who'd found each other in marsh mud and built something real. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, there was a moment of silence that felt weighted, heavy with possibility. Part of me had irrationally worried that Eleanor or Robert would somehow appear, would ruin this, too. But the beach remained peaceful, the waves providing soft background music, and we said our vows without interruption. Afterward, we had dinner at a local restaurant, filled with drinks and laughter and stories. Alex's father gave a toast about finding partners who challenge you to be better. Maya made jokes about our terrible field fashion sense. Nobody mentioned my absent family. It was the best day of my life. Our honeymoon was a research trip to the Florida Keys. 2 weeks studying marine iguanas and collecting data that would supplement our coastal adaptation models. We worked alongside local scientists, learned from indigenous conservation approaches, and spent evenings watching sea lions play in the surf. Some people might have thought it was a strange honeymoon, but it was perfect for us. We were building our marriage on a foundation of shared purpose, and that felt more romantic than any beach resort. Professional success followed personal happiness. At 31, I was offered a position on California's Coastal Commission, advising on environmental policy. A salary came with it, $140,000 annually, plus consulting fees that pushed my income well past what Daniel had been making at Robert's firm. I bought a house. Not a McMansion in suburbia, but a beautiful Craftsman in Laguna Beach with native landscaping and solar panels, a 10-minute walk from the ocean. I'd saved aggressively, invested carefully, and paid cash. No mortgage, no debt, no one to answer to. The house had been built in 1924, weathered but solid. It needed updates. The electrical was ancient, the plumbing questionable, but the bones were gorgeous. Hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, a fireplace with original tiles, a yard that backed on a protected greenbelt where deer came to graze. In the evenings, Alex and I renovated it ourselves over 6 months. I learned to tile, to install light fixtures, to refinish floors. Every improvement was intentional. Energy-efficient windows, low-flow fixtures, reclaimed wood countertops. We turned the backyard into a native plant paradise. California poppies, coastal sage, lupins that attracted butterflies, a small vegetable garden where we grew tomatoes and herbs. The day we moved in, I stood in the living room and cried. Not from sadness, but from the sheer weight of accomplishment, the quiet, immense pride. I was 32. I owned a house. I had a career I loved, a husband who respected me, financial security. I built it alone. Everything Eleanor said I'd never achieve, I'd exceeded. Sometimes I'd walk through the rooms and imagine what she'd say. Would she critique my furniture choices? Would Robert comment that the house was too small, not impressive enough? Would they compare it unfavorably to Daniel's larger place? Then I'd remember they didn't get an opinion. This house existed in a world they couldn't touch. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had wanted financial success and social standing. I'd achieved both on my own terms, in a field they dismissed as worthless. Life was good, better than good. The grief over my family faded to a dull ache I only noticed occasionally, usually during holidays. Thanksgiving that first year without them was strange. Alex's family invited us to Seattle, and I spent the day with people who asked genuine questions about my research, who complimented my contributions to dinner, who made space for me at their table without conditions. His nephew asked if I could help with his science fair project. His mother framed a photo of our wedding and hung it with the other family pictures. Christmas was harder. I kept thinking about the years I'd spent hoping this would be the holiday my parents noticed me. The gifts I'd carefully chosen that were opened with polite disinterest. The conversations where I was background noise. Alex found me crying on Christmas Eve, watching snow fall over the bay. Missing them, I'd choked out. Missing what they should have been, the parents I deserved. I'm not sad about losing Eleanor and Robert as they actually were. I'm sad about losing the possibility that they could have changed. They had 28 years to change, he said softly, stroking my hair. I know, I whispered back. But there was always this stupid hope that next time would be different, that they'd finally see me. Walking away meant accepting they never would. He held me while I grieved. Not for the people they were, but for the relationship we never had. Then, 5 years after I'd walked away, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I was preparing for a presentation to the state legislature, focused and busy. Something, a faint tremor of intuition, made me pick up. Hello. Is this? A male voice asked, uncertain. Is this Daniel's sister? My stomach dropped, a cold, hard stone. Who is this? It's Michael, your uncle. I got this number from your old college roommate. Took some digging. I sat down slowly, the legs of my chair scraping against the floor. Why are you calling? It's about your parents. Your mom especially. Look, there's no easy way to say this. She's sick. Cancer, stage 4. She's been in treatment for 8 months and it's not working. The doctors say maybe 6 months left. The floor seemed to shift beneath me. I see. And Robert, your dad, had a massive stroke 3 months ago. He's partially paralyzed. Needs full-time care. My gaze drifted to my presentation notes, not seeing them. That's terrible. Daniel's doing what he can, but there are complications. The commercial real estate market collapsed in their sector. Some bad investments, over-leveraged properties. Then the stroke meant Robert couldn't manage things. They've lost most of their assets. The house is mortgaged to the ceiling. Eleanor's treatment isn't fully covered by insurance. Why are you telling me this? Michael's sigh was heavy, laced with desperation. Because they need help. Family help. Daniel's maxed out his resources. And Eleanor, she's been asking for you. Says she wants to see you before she dies. The woman who wished she'd never had me wanted to see me. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no grief, just a vast, echoing emptiness. Tell her no, please. Michael's voice cracked. I know what happened. Sharon told me about that phone call, about the things Eleanor said. It was unforgivable, but she's dying. She's your mother. She stopped being my mother when she told me I shouldn't exist. People say terrible things they don't mean. She's suffered for it. They both have. Losing you, it's haunted them. Eleanor cries about it. Robert, even after the stroke, he mentions you. They made mistakes. Mistakes are forgetting a birthday or missing a recital. What they did was deliberate cruelty over decades. Please just think about it. They're at San Mateo General Hospital in San Jose. Room 412. Eleanor is there full-time now. They can't afford home care anymore. He hung up before I could refuse again. Alex found me an hour later, still sitting at my desk, staring at nothing. What's wrong? I told him everything, the words spilling out in a rush. He listened without interrupting, his hand warm and steady on my back, then pulled me close. What do you want to do? I don't know. The honesty felt strange, raw. Part of me feels like I should visit. She's dying. But part of me remembers being 13 and crying because she forgot my birthday while planning Daniel's party. Remembers being 22 and having her tell me my graduation didn't matter as much as Daniel's engagement. "You don't owe them anything," Alex said quietly, his voice firm. "They chose this. You're a child who needed parents, and they failed you repeatedly. The fact that they're suffering now doesn't erase that. She's dying. Lots of people die. Some of them are terrible parents." I almost laughed, a dry, bitter sound. That's dark, but true. He kept my face in his hands, his eyes searching mine. "I'll support whatever you decide, but don't go because you feel obligated. Don't sacrifice your peace for people who destroyed it repeatedly." I thought about it for 3 days. On the 4th day, I made a decision. I drove to San Jose alone. The hospital was depressing in the way all hospitals are, but San Mateo General had the particular grimness of a facility serving people who couldn't afford better care. Overworked staff, outdated equipment, a pervasive smell of disinfectant and despair. Room 412 was in the oncology ward. I stood outside for 10 minutes, my hand hovering over the door, before finally pushing it open. Eleanor looked like a stranger. The vibrant, critical woman I remembered, sharp and unyielding, had been replaced by someone hollow and gray. She'd lost at least 40 pounds, her skin papery thin, her hair gone from chemotherapy. An oxygen tube ran under her nose, a fragile lifeline. Robert sat beside her in a wheelchair, the left side of his face drooping, one arm curled uselessly in his lap, a distant, confused look in his eyes. They both stared when I walked in, their gazes locking onto mine. "Hello," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil churning inside me. Eleanor made a sound, half sob, half gasp. "You came? Oh God, you came." I stayed by the door, unwilling to cross the threshold fully. "Michael called me." "I'm so sorry." Tears ran down her gaunt face, tracing clean paths. "I'm so sorry for everything. I was wrong. I was so wrong about you. About everything." Robert tried to speak, but the words came out slurred, unintelligible. Eleanor translated, her voice breaking. "He says he's sorry too. We both are. We were terrible parents to you. We see that now." I looked at them. These broken people who'd once seemed invincible in their certainty that I was insufficient. "You told me you wished you had never had me." Eleanor sobbed harder, her body racked with tremors. "I didn't mean it. I was angry and stupid. And I've regretted those words every single day since. When you disappeared, when you blocked us and moved away, I understood. I deserved it. But it's killed me, not the cancer. Losing you is what's killing me. You didn't lose me. You threw me away." "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I know I did. I was so focused on what I wanted you to be that I couldn't see who you were. You were always so smart, so passionate about your work. You were good and kind, and I treated you like you were worthless. I destroyed my relationship with my daughter because she wasn't the doll I'd imagined." Robert made more anguished sounds, his one good hand twitching. Eleanor nodded weakly. "He says he's proud of you. We looked you up online. We've been following your work. The Coastal Commission, the papers, the documentary. You are extraordinary. You became everything we should have helped you become, and you did it without us." I felt something twist in my chest, a hot, bitter ache, but I wouldn't let it surface. "Is that why you wanted to see me? To tell me you were wrong now that I've achieved the success you claimed I never would?" "No." Eleanor reached toward me with one skeletal hand, her fingers trembling. "I wanted to see you because you're my daughter and I love you. I've always loved you even when I was too broken to show it properly. I wanted to apologize before I die. I wanted you to know that every terrible thing I said was a lie I told myself because I was too proud and too stupid to accept that you were perfect exactly as you were. I'm not perfect. I'm just myself. That's what makes you perfect." She was crying steadily now, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "Please. I know I have no right to ask anything, but could you maybe visit again? Could we have some time before I die? I want to know you. The real you, not the daughter I tried to force you to be." I looked at Robert, who was also crying, tears running down the paralyzed side of his face. I looked at the small, sterile room with its cheap flowers and get-well cards from Daniel and Chloe. I looked at the medical equipment keeping Eleanor alive, the fluids pumping, chemicals into her veins that weren't working. They'd lost everything: money, health, status, security. The life they built on judgment and material success had crumbled, and in the ruins they'd found regret. "I don't know," I said finally, the words heavy in the air. "I don't know if I can do that." "I understand." Eleanor's voice was fading, a whisper. "But please know that I'm sorry, that I wish I could go back and be the mother you deserved. That you were always enough. You were always more than enough." I left without promising anything. Drove back to Carlsbad in silence, the miles blurring, my mind a storm of conflicting emotions. I walked on the beach until dark, the rhythmic crash of waves a balm, a constant, unchanging presence. Alex was waiting when I got home, his face etched with concern. "How was it?" "Sad." I leaned against him, feeling the solid comfort of his body. "She apologized. She says she's proud of me now. That she was wrong about everything." "How do you feel?" "Empty. Not satisfied. Not sad, just empty." He held me while I processed. "Eventually," I said, "they want me to visit again. To have a relationship before she dies." "Do you want that?" "I don't know. Part of me feels like I should forgive them. They're suffering. She's dying. But forgiveness feels like erasing everything they did. Like saying it's okay that they damaged me for decades because they're sorry now." "Forgiveness isn't an eraser," Alex said quietly, his voice gentle but firm. "It's just deciding that their damage doesn't control you anymore. You can forgive them without giving them access to you. You can acknowledge their regret without sacrificing your peace." I spent the next 3 days barely functional. I'd go through the motions at work, reviewing reports, attending meetings, responding to emails, but my mind was elsewhere, circling, wrestling with the impossible. Maya noticed. "You okay? You've been quiet." I told her everything, the raw, ugly truth of it all. She listened without judgment, then said something that shifted my perspective, a small tremor that began to crack through my frozen indecision. "When my grandfather was dying, he wanted to apologize for how he mistreated my mother when she was a child. He'd found religion, wanted forgiveness so he could die in peace. She refused to see him. Everyone called her heartless." Maya paused, her gaze steady. "But you know what she told me? He wants absolution so he can feel better about himself. My peace requires him not being in my life. His deathbed doesn't erase decades of trauma, and his comfort isn't my responsibility." "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "He died." She didn't go to the funeral. She slept better than she had in years because she chose herself over his need for redemption. Maya squeezed my hand, a warm, solid presence. "You don't owe dying people forgiveness. You don't owe anyone access to you, regardless of their circumstances. If seeing them helps you heal, go. If it reopens wounds you've worked hard to close, stay away. But don't go out of obligation." This conversation, this brutal honesty about prioritizing one's own well-being over external expectations, even deathbed pleas, highlights a critical aspect of psychological health, the establishment of healthy boundaries. It's the recognition that true healing and peace often necessitate protecting oneself from sources of past trauma, even when those sources are now vulnerable or seeking amends. Forgiveness can be an internal process, distinct from reconciliation, which requires active participation and trustworthiness from both parties. That conversation helped, but it didn't make the decision easier. I thought about that for weeks. During that time, Daniel reached out through work channels, desperate, emotional emails begging me to visit our mother, describing her decline, the pain, the regret that consumed her. He apologized too, for not standing up for me more, for being complicit in my erasure. Michael called twice more. Sharon sent a letter. Even Chloe tried to reach me, saying Lily asked about me sometimes, the aunt she'd never met. I received updates through these channels. Eleanor's cancer was aggressive. She had maybe 3 months now. Robert had developed pneumonia from being bedridden. Their medical debt was over $600,000. The house would be sold to cover it. Daniel was trying to rebuild the business, but it would take years. They'd built an empire on shifting sand, and it had swallowed them whole. I made my decision 2 months after that first hospital visit. I drove to San Jose on a Saturday morning, this time with purpose. The hospital room was more crowded. Daniel was there with Chloe and Lily, who looked older, taller. Sharon sat beside Eleanor's bed, her face drawn. Robert looked worse, his breathing labored, shallow. They all looked up when I entered, a collective gasp. Lily, 10 years old now, stared with wide, curious eyes. "Hi," I said. Eleanor struggled to sit up, her body racked with effort. "You came back." I did. I stayed near the door, my posture deliberate. I've thought a lot about everything. About what you said, what you did, all of it. "I'm so sorry," Eleanor whispered, tears already forming in her eyes. I held up a hand, stopping her. "Let me finish. You spent my entire life making me feel inadequate. You compared me to Daniel constantly. You dismissed my passions, my career, my choices. You told me I was worthless. You said you wished you had never had me. Those things damaged me in ways I'm still working to heal." Eleanor was crying silently, her body shaking. Daniel looked at the floor, his face pale. "But you were right about one thing. I'm not the daughter you wanted. I never was. I'm better than that daughter. I'm someone who builds instead of destroying. I create value that isn't measured in dollars. I help endangered species survive. I educate future scientists. I contribute to something larger than myself." I took a deep breath, the words flowing now, clear and strong. "I came here to tell you that I've forgiven you." Eleanor sobbed, a guttural sound of relief. Robert made anguished sounds. "I forgive you because carrying anger was hurting me, not you. I forgive you because I've built a life so good that your opinions of me don't matter anymore. I forgive you because you're small, broken people who couldn't see past your own limitations, and I feel sorry for you." "Thank you," Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you so much." But my voice was steady, unwavering. "Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I forgive you, but I won't have a relationship with you. I won't visit again. I won't pretend we're family. You had 20 years to know me, and you chose not to. I won't give you my last months just because you're dying. That ship sailed 4 years ago." "Please," Daniel said, his voice raw. "Please don't do this. She's our mother. She's your mother. She stopped being mine when she told me I shouldn't exist. You got the parents you needed. I didn't. That's not my fault. And it's not my responsibility to fix it at the end." I looked at Eleanor, really looked at her, at the raw vulnerability beneath the layers of pain and regret. "I hope your last months are peaceful. I hope you find whatever redemption you're looking for, but you'll find it without me." "I understand." Eleanor's voice was barely audible. "I understand, but please, could you tell me about your life? Just a little, so I can die knowing who you became." I considered leaving, but something made me stay. Made me talk for 15 minutes about my work, my husband, my house by the ocean. I told them about leading the Coastal Commission, about testifying before Congress, about the documentary that had reached millions of people. I told them I was happy. Eleanor listened with her eyes closed, tears still flowing silently. When I finished, she said, "I'm so proud of you. I know I have no right to be, but I am. You're exactly what the world needs." "Goodbye," I said. I walked out and didn't look back. Daniel followed me to the parking lot, his steps heavy. "How can you be so cold?" His voice was accusatory, sharp with pain. "She's dying." "I know." I unlocked my car, the click loud in the quiet lot. "I'm not cold. I'm protecting myself from people who hurt me repeatedly." She apologized. Apologies don't erase damage. They don't entitle her to my presence or my forgiveness or my time. She made choices for nearly 3 decades. I'm making mine now. What about Dad? He can barely speak, but he's trying. He wants to know you. He should have wanted that when I was 12. When I was 16. When I was 25. Not now. When it's convenient for him. Daniel's face hardened, a mask of resentment. "You're punishing sick people. That makes you just as bad as you think they were." "No." I met his eyes, my own unwavering. "I'm refusing to set myself on fire to keep them warm. There's a difference. You stay if you want. You be the good child who sacrifices everything. I'm going home to my husband and my work and my life. The life I built without them. The life they said I'd never have. I drove away. In my rearview mirror, Daniel stood alone in the parking lot, looking lost, a solitary figure against the sterile backdrop of the hospital. Eleanor died 6 weeks later. Sharon called to tell me. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't attend the funeral. I sent no flowers, no card, no acknowledgement. Robert died 3 months after that. Same response. Daniel tried to reach out several times over the following year. I never responded. As far as I was concerned, I had no family in San Jose. But I had family. Alex and I adopted a daughter from foster care when I was 35. A brilliant 8-year-old named Jasmine who loved science and asked endless questions about marine ecosystems. We gave her the childhood I'd wished for: support, encouragement, unconditional love. At 37, I was appointed to lead California's new climate resilience initiative, a $50 million program coordinating coastal adaptation strategies statewide. The governor mentioned me by name in a press conference. National media covered the story. One article mentioned my background: doctor, narrator's name placeholder, from UC Santa Cruz, decorated researcher, policy expert. No mention of family. I'd made sure of that. My work has been cited in Supreme Court cases about environmental protection. Students travel across the country to work with me. I've testified before the United Nations on coastal conservation. My salary is more than Robert made in his best years. I never think about whether Eleanor and Robert saw any of this before they died. Their approval stopped mattering the day I walked away. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel guilty, if I should have given them the deathbed reconciliation they wanted, if forgiveness should have looked different. But then I come home to Jasmine showing me her science project, to Alex planning our next field research trip, to the view of the ocean I've worked so hard to protect. I see the life I've built from nothing, with no help from people who should have been my foundation. And I know I made the right choice. They wanted me to stop existing. So I did for them. And in that absence, I became more than they ever imagined possible. The daughter they didn't want became the woman they could never be. Someone who builds instead of destroys. Who creates value that outlasts any bank account. Who chose meaning over money and found both. I don't need their posthumous pride. I don't need their deathbed apologies. I don't need anything from them. I have everything I need. I built it myself. What would you have done?